Hey Creep Freaks, Ren here. This one's more of a thriller than straight up horror, but I had a lot of fun writing it. At first, it started with an idea. Why would a serial killer stab people or do something similar when they could simply sell drugs and kill people that way? The penalties for selling drugs are certainly less than murder, unless a prosecutor can also prove intent. It's kind of like how the smart criminals sell illicit cigarettes rather than drugs. Similar or better profit margin and less penalties if caught. Anyways, that's how it all started. Quick plug for my book, Creepy Horror, on Amazon. If you haven't yet clicked the link below, I would appreciate it if you do so and check it out. Anyways, let's get to the story. I hope you all enjoy. Put in the Pain, written in red by Ren Bryant. Red and purple all over. I can get away with it for as long as I want. I'm zest clean. The message was delivered like all the others. A clip on TikTok with a computer voice in all caps red typewriter font. The music to accompany the 7-second clip was an untrendy choice. Also Sprach Zarathustra from the movie 2001. There had been 3 TikTok videos now from the same username, Zestfully Clean, all coming after police discovered a murder victim in Grove City. This was the 4th video, but there was no body yet, not that the police knew about anyways. At first, the police didn't even notice the videos, and why would they? You see the bar of soap, you know the pain is in it, the first short clip said. It meant nothing, especially with all the other noise that was on TikTok. The second clip said, Zestfully Clean is such a beautiful thing to watch. Again, it meant nothing. It wasn't until after the 3rd murder, when Zestfully Clean tagged the police chief's 13-year-old daughter Brenna, that the pieces started getting put together. The 3rd message read, I could China white you if I wanted. You won't even see my face. Brenna usually ignored DMs and tags from people she didn't know. Life on socials was teenage hell if she didn't do that. But on this one, she got a bad feeling and told her mom about it. Police Chief Deborah Taylor, Debbie to those who know her, initially dismissed the TikTok message that Brenna showed her, as most parents would. Though a lot of single parenting was difficult, Debbie occasionally used her police experience to scare Brenna straight. Brenna's dad was also a cop, though she didn't see him anymore. Being scared straight worked for the most part. Brenna was a good girl who didn't get into much trouble. She had some wild friends, but Debbie thought that was normal. And Debbie warned Brenna every week about staying safe online, and she gave the same talk again after this TikTok message. She had seen too many bad things happen to innocent girls to know the web wasn't a safe place to befriend others. But it wasn't until Brenna read the message out loud that Chief Taylor went into police mode. Chief Taylor recognized the slang immediately. China white, heroin. The message was a threat for sure. Could it be? She thought. No one outside the police department and a few others knew about the overdoses. Her daughter certainly didn't know about them. Debbie always shielded Brenna away from the realities of her job. Chief Taylor looked at the 2 other TikTok videos and tried to see anything that could connect them together. There was nothing as far as she can tell. Yet, there were those bodies and the baggie of drugs. The first overdose the police found was a young African-American woman, 24 years old. She was slumped in the kitchen of her 1-bedroom apartment. The police thought it was a typical heroin overdose. They had a lot of them lately, people injecting junk they didn't know was laced with fentanyl and other things. Cynthia was her name. She was cold with a needle sticking out of her arm when they found her. The tissue around the injection site was green and necrotic. That was something new for Grove City. The lab said it was a tranq variant. It didn't contain xylazine, but a different sedative. Next to the dead woman was a small black Mylar bag with a Zest soap sticker on it, the bag that contained the drugs. There was no signs of foul play, so the police didn't investigate further. The second body was also a young African-American female. Tessa was her name. Again, a needle was in her arm, and the injection site bubbled green. A Zest soap zip-top bag was next to her. The toxicology report came back showing a medicine cabinet worth of drugs in her system. Tessa was found in the woods off Washington Park, a place often crawling with drug dealers at night. Dealers liked it because they could stash their backpack of drugs in the trees, so if they got popped, they wouldn't have product on them. Junkies liked the park because they could shoot up immediately after buying. Unlike the first overdose victim, Tessa also showed signs of rape and strangulation. Her trachea was compressed, her panties down around her ankles, and her vagina was scratched and raw. The police worked under the assumption that Tessa traded rough sex for smack and then accidentally OD'd. Tessa was in the system. She had traded her body for drugs before. The third body was Jackie. Jackie's body was found about 10 miles from Cynthia, 5 miles from Tessa. Jackie was an elementary school teacher. The police came to her house after she didn't show up for school 2 days in a row. She was the same as the others. Black woman, needle in her arms, skin bubbling green at the injection site, Zest baggie next to her. As far as the police were concerned, all the deaths were accidental. The women had no idea they were injecting bad junk. Originally, the police were working under the assumption that a new dealer came into town with tainted heroin, and these Zest bags were his signature, his branding. The joke down at the precinct was that the heroin was cut with actual Zest soap, which is why the skin bubbled green at the injection site. Whether Zest was a good brand for smack was besides the point. Branding amongst drug dealers became popular a few years back. Illicit drugs often had better marketing than legal brands. At some point in time, drug dealers learned about consumer centricity, how building a brand would increase demand for their product. More demand, more sales. At first, the dealers used glass and other packaging, but unless they were doing street-level deals or hand delivering, such packaging created more problems than it solved. There was the weight and size, and packaging affected the pricing, cutting too far into their margins. That's when the Mylar bags became popular. Dealers could come up with a logo, slap it on a bag, and customers would be guaranteed of what was inside. While someone on TikTok was new, drug dealing on social media wasn't. The cops were well aware of all sorts of illicit goods being sold on Facebook, Instagram, and other places. Sometimes the sellers were brazen and would actually show their product, but most of the time, they spoke in code. Word would get around about a certain hashtag or a new slang term for dope. They'd send money through Venmo, and within a day or two, a package of whatever would arrive at their doorstep. The police placed a couple of news articles warning people about adulterated heroin after finding the third victim. Unfortunately, they've had to put these warnings out before. But once a dealer changed suppliers or moved out of an area, the overdoses would stop. They figured this would be the same. It wasn't until Chief Taylor's kid got tagged in the TikTok video that Debbie knew there was something else going on. She called Deputy Chief Ivan Higgs first. Deputy Chief Higgs was another lifer at the police department, Debbie's confidant on the force, someone who knew everybody and how to pull the right strings to make things happen. "We may have something big," Debbie said. She read aloud the TikTok text over the phone. "I don't think it's bad junk we're dealing with. Look up Zestfully Clean on TikTok and you'll see. He tagged my daughter with his last message. Seems he wants to communicate with us. Get the boys to look into this person, find out anything we can." Chief Taylor decided the best course of action was to go public with the murders, do a bit of a dog and pony show, let the killer know they were on to him. The police assumed the killer was male, since most of them are, that he was a drug dealer or had connection to drugs, that maybe he was a gang member and this could be some sort of revenge. So, with a line of deputies behind her and TV cameras in front of her, Chief Taylor stood at the podium and asked, "How many times do you think you can get away with murder?" "As long as I want." That was the message. That was the direct response to the chief's question in the latest TikTok video. Chief Taylor wasn't surprised the murderer responded via TikTok like he did. It's what she was hoping for. Yet, she also wasn't sure she should be happy that a killer responded like she had hoped, or that she should have even asked the question in the first place. Though Debbie Taylor had seen just about every type of perpetrator in her 14 years at Grove City Police, she never came across a serial killer. It wasn't exactly the type of thing she wanted to deal with in her first year as chief either. Debbie took the job when the last chief stepped down over some police brutality claims that City Hall didn't like. She always thought of herself one day as leading the department, but she wasn't sure she was ready. She thought she'd do a few more years rising up the ranks and then try for chief, but she couldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. There was all sorts of chatter, of course, that she got the job because she was a black woman. Some suggested she was soft on crime because she took a community-based approach to policing, that she said the right words to the mayor to get his stamp of approval, that she said what the mayor wanted to hear so he could get reelected. Debbie shrugged it all off. They said the same things too about the district attorney when he was appointed. Debbie knew that her years in the force gave her the experience necessary to be chief. There were some new things to learn, sure, some hurdles to jump through, but that's how it was in any new job. Most of her first year as chief had been nothing special. Debbie did some press conferences, met with some community groups in the police union, and basically kept the ship afloat. She was surprised there wasn't actually much police work to do as chief, that it was really all political. She hated the politics, but she knew she couldn't avoid it. And that's where Deputy Chief Ivan Higgs came in. Ivan had been a cop at Grove City for longer than Debbie, and most thought he would be promoted to chief. But again, the rumor swirled that the city needed a kinder, gentler face for the police, not another white guy, and Ivan stayed put in his deputy chief position. Ivan was the first person that Debbie called after she got the chief gig. He was her best friend on the force, and she didn't want there to be any hard feelings about her getting promoted over him. There were none. Ivan was always the consummate professional. The cops focused on finding the fourth victim. They looked at the words from the video, red and purple all over. They weren't sure what it meant, but they had some ideas. First, they expected the fourth victim would be another black female. They didn't have answers for why black women may be targeted. They only had dead bodies as proof. Though generally speaking, black men had the highest overdose rates in Grove City, it was black women that had seen the highest increases of overdoses in the past few years. In fact, it was now the case that in Grove City, black men were less likely to die from overdoses than women, no matter the race. Most of the analysts thought that was because women were less experienced with drugs and more susceptible to misuse. Second, the police thought there could be signs of rape like they found in Tessa, the second victim. This part they really weren't sure about. Forensics couldn't tell whether the sexual degradation of Tessa happened before or shortly after death. And given that 2 of the 3 bodies weren't sexually assaulted, the police thought what happened to Tessa might be specific to her, especially given her rap sheet. Chief Taylor's neighbors knew who she was, and of course so did Brenna's friends. But other than that, Debbie liked to keep a low profile. Her street was quiet because it was a good neighborhood, not because the chief kept her eyes peeled, which she did, but no one knew that. It was a mixed-race neighborhood, middle income, and everyone on the block got along. People mostly kept to themselves, except for a wave or a head nod as they drove by. But there were no HOA disputes or any real disruptions. So when an ambulance showed up at 5043 Woodhaven, Everyone on the block came outside. They never had an ambulance on the block before. Debbie knew the house belonged to the McFarlands, one of the other black families on the street, but she couldn't remember their first names. They didn't have a daughter and their youngest was still in primary, so Debbie didn't have much reason to interact with them. From the couple of times they met at neighborhood block parties, they seemed like an upright family. As the paramedics rushed inside, Debbie discreetly asked the ambulance driver what was happening. "Mother's non-responsive," the driver said. "Looks like another overdose." Debbie's guts dropped at the words. Another overdose. Could it be on her block? Debbie flashed her badge and entered the house. She paused in the hallway, frowned, and felt the tightness in her chest. The husband and their young son, he couldn't have been more than 8, huddled on the couch together, hugging and crying. The husband looked up at Chief Taylor. My daughter and I just came back from a week of visiting my mom and he broke down in tears and clutched his child tight, unable to finish the rest. Next to the kitchen table, a skinny black mother lay motionless. Her skin was ashen and a needle stuck out of her arm. Vomit covered the floor. Wearing a blue satin spaghetti-strap nightgown, she looked like she was sleeping. Paramedics were administering Narcan as Debbie approached. On the kitchen table, Debbie noticed the black Mylar bag with a sticker of Zest soap. She let out a sigh. "No response," one of the paramedics said. Another dose of Narcan was administered, but Debbie knew it wouldn't do a thing. The woman wasn't coming back. She asked for some gloves from the paramedics and crouched down next to the body, inspecting the injection site. The woman's skin was bubbling green around the needle, zestfully clean. Chief Taylor looked for visible signs of violence. She was red and purple, just like the TikTok video said it would be. Her legs and arms were ripped open with welts, the kind that comes from being whipped. The woman's eyes were swollen lumps. Her orbital bone looked broken. A trickle of blood dripped out of her ear and onto the brown hardwood floor. Under the cuts and bruises, Debbie thought the woman had the soft, flawless features that comes with an easy suburban life and a medicine cabinet of creams and lotions. Though Chief Taylor knew heroin addicts came in all shapes and sizes, and the feeling of needing an escape crossed all races and economic classes, Debbie couldn't help but think this woman was too strong to fall into the drug game. Maybe it was because she was a neighbor. Maybe it was just Debbie not wanting to believe reality. If her son was a baby, then perhaps it would be more understandable. Chief Taylor had seen plenty of cases of women self-medicating to treat postpartum depression. Debbie shrugged and exhaled deeply. Maybe Miss McFarland had a back injury and fell down the rabbit hole of addiction thanks to OxyContin. Lord knows it's happened plenty of times before, Debbie thought. Chief Taylor stood up, her hands on her hips, staring at the corpse. There was more to inspect, signs of sexual assault, for instance, but she had seen enough. She would leave the rest for forensics. When Debbie headed out, she noticed the back door was slightly ajar. Interesting, she thought. She made a mental note to tell the officers who would investigate the case. On the way out of the McFarland's house, Debbie called Deputy Chief Higgs and informed him of the news. They had their 4th victim. Though it wasn't mentioned, Chief Taylor knew there was no coincidence that the latest victim was someone on her block. The killer knew where she lived. This kill was a message, louder than anything that could be put on TikTok. There's much in Beau Redmond's life he could be mad about. There was school, or the lack thereof. He dropped out of school at 14 after his mother died of an overdose. There were alcohol-induced beatings from his father. They continued until his dad ran out on the family when he was 7. There was the clawing his way out of homelessness, flipping petty tricks behind the Wendy's on 80th Street to get enough dough to eat from the dollar menu. There was the persistent joblessness, the feeling like he didn't belong in society, feeling like nobody wanted him. There was the sadness about his mama. He never got over seeing her on the couch, foamy drool coming out of her mouth, a spoon on her chest, a needle in her arm. Getting welts from the belt was one of Beau's earliest memories. It'd come out for no particular reason, striking his arms, his back, his behind. Maybe it'd be an innocent question from Beau while his dad was on the recliner, pounding down another Pabst after a hard day of digging ditches. Or maybe it'd be Beau saying he didn't want to eat his peas. "Boy, don't you fucking interrupt my drinking and thinking. Boy, don't you know how goddamn much this food costs?" his dad would say as he struck him like a mule. As far as Beau knew, this was life. Life was hard and painful, and he was only 5. The beatings lasted until Beau's dad ran out on the family. After that, Beau's mom started bringing various men around to their modest Tennessee ranch house. The mean kids at school called it a trailer, but it had a carport, so to Beau, it was a real house. A Pall Mall hanging off his mom's lips and a stranger grabbing her ass. Beau's mom would say, "This is Gerald, this is Johnny, this is Rusty." Though they didn't beat him, Beau thought they were worse than his dad. Greasy and contemptuous, the men didn't even say a word to Beau. They merely walked with his mom to her bedroom and made giggling and groaning noises when the door closed. It was Jamar that really had an impact on Beau. It was the first black man Beau met in person, the first black man Beau's mom brought around. Jamar was nicer than the others, nicer than his dad. Jamar at least acknowledged Beau's existence. And Beau's mom stuck with Jamar longer than the others. One day, Beau saw Jamar come into the house in a police uniform. He had a gun and everything. That's when Beau learned he was a cop, which he thought was kind of cool. By then, Beau had just turned a teenager, so he walked the line between fascinated and rolling his eyes at authority. After a year with Beau's mom, Jamar split just like his dad, just walked on out and never returned. Beau's mom was a mess after that. She wouldn't leave the house and started drinking. Not beer like his dad did, but the hard stuff. Whiskey and vodka and whatnot. She'd wake up in the morning with a shaky hand and fill a coffee mug with the stuff. It wasn't too long after that when Beau discovered her body on the couch. Her lips were blue when Beau came home from school. A glass of vodka sat on the coffee table next to the couch, a spoon and lighter on her chest. A rubber tourniquet and needle were still in his mom's arm. Beau cried and shook her, but there was nothing he could do. He called 911 and hit the streets. He knew it was either that or foster care. "Hey, where we at?" There was no answer, but Beau followed the other man into the dimly lit house, ducking under the wind chime and through the front door, where other Hispanic men waited with pointed guns. Beau thought he was somewhere on the east side of Grove City, past 39th Street, but he wasn't sure. The Mexicans covered his eyes and put him in the back of an Impala and drove. He felt the bumps of the train tracks that separated the town and tried to keep track of turns, but it didn't help much. One look around, though, and Beau could tell he was in a low-income area, the immigrant part of town, the kind of place he grew up in, Beau thought. Cars littered the front yard and roosters roamed freely. When he was living on the streets, Beau got to know some people who could get things. Who they were depended on what you needed. The blacks could get you guns, the Italians could get you women, the Mexicans could get you drugs. Well, they all could get you drugs, but they specialized in different things. Whites got you meth, blacks got you weed, and Mexicans controlled the heroin game in the city. That's why Beau had connected with them. He needed a brick. "Shoot it up," the voice at the back of the room said in a heavy Hispanic accent. Beau looked around in a bit of panic. He laughed nervously. He wasn't expecting this, though he should have. It was a common refrain amongst drug dealers. They insisted first-time buyers used the product to prove they weren't a cop. But Bo didn't want to use any product. He spent a good deal of time on the streets and saw the ravages of hardcore drug use. The zombies in the street, the emaciated, brain-fried who talked to themselves on park benches. That wasn't for Bo. He lived clean. The heroin he was buying wasn't for him. He was on a mission. The Mexicans that brought Bo to the trap house knew he wasn't a cop and vouched for him. It took a bit of convincing while guns were pointed at his head, but eventually everyone's testosterone settled and Bo got his brick. When he got home, he took what he ordered from the veterinary supply store and mixed the products together until he got something he thought might work. Bo tried his creation on a street dog. The dog stumbled after the injection. His head bobbed lower and lower as if he was taking a nap. Vomit dripped from his mouth as the dog purge reflex stopped working. After a bit of gurgling and stumbling, the dog fell over and died. Bo burst out in a fit of laughter. The final result was fine, Bo thought, but it wasn't quite what he was looking for. Bo tweaked the mix, cutting the heroin with more muscle relaxant and adding extra solvent to amplify the pain. After finding another stray dog, he tested his concoction again. This time he watched as the fur around the injection site fell off and the dog's skin turned green. The dog howled, chewed at his leg, and ran in circles. That continued until he slowed, began vomiting foam and wheezing, before finally dropping dead. Perfect, Bo thought, as he laughed his insane laugh while staring at the dead dog. The Zest stickers started on a whim. Bo thought it was funny given how the injection site bubbled green. The Mexicans gave him some Mylar bags he could use to sell his junk. A gift from the plug, they said. He saw various Mylar bags on the street when he was living in a tent. Some would have a cursive letter on them. Some would have a picture of Mickey Mouse. One of his addict friends told him that's what was done, like back in the day when acid would be stamped with a certain picture. Injecting dogs was one thing, Bo thought, but he needed to see if his formula would have the same effect in people, if it would have the same effect in his ultimate target. Bo scoured the streets and internet looking for someone that matched the profile he wanted. Though he was looking for someone middle-aged, he worried a middle-aged user would already be fried. He needed someone who was new to the drug game. He found his first victim on a message board. She'd expressed how lonely she was. Bo reached out and got a date. After dinner, he tied her up, gagged her, and pulled out his kit. In front of her bugging eyes, he took out the powder from his Mylar Zest bag, melting it to a liquid on a spoon, then taking out a syringe and loading it. He tied a rope around her arm and waited for her veins to show. It didn't take long. The woman fought and moved a bunch as Bo stuck the needle in her arm, but it didn't stop him. If anything, it just made the injection pain worse. He untied her and the reaction was exactly what he was hoping for. She screamed bloody murder as her body slowly shut down. Vomit dribbled from her mouth. Her pupils went non-existent and her skin bubbled green. It took about 5 glorious minutes. Bo found it exhilarating and couldn't contain his glee. His laughter filled the room. His heart knocked against his chest and he was all smiles as the woman's life faded. Bo didn't think he would find killing so viscerally pleasing. He was doing it with a purpose, but still, the feeling of taking somebody's life was exhilarating. He thought it was probably a better high than the heroin. As soon as he walked out of his victim's apartment, he vowed to do it again. And he did, in a park in the middle of the city. And he did it again with another young woman. Each time he injected his poison into their arms, his eyes closed and pleasure washed over him. Like the Zest stickers, TikTok also started on a whim. He wanted to get noticed, but he also wanted to toy with the police, to have some fun, and what better way to do it than social media? He thought it would make him look stupid. He knew they wouldn't be watching, and when it came out that his messages were out there this whole time, the police would have egg on their face. Chief Deborah Taylor would be asked a lot of questions about her incompetence. Deborah Taylor, the one Jamar left his mom for, the one Jamar impregnated. "I forbid you from going out," Debbie told Brenna, her index finger wagging in her daughter's face. "Forbid? You forbid me? You can't do this. All my friends are going out tonight." "Yes, I can," Debbie said back forcefully. "I'm your mom. I'm here to protect you." Ever since the killing on the block 3 weeks ago, Chief Taylor had the house on lockdown. Brenna knew about the death. She knew there was an overdose, and she had heard whispers that it was a murder, but her mom never confirmed it. "Then why do I go to school?" Brenna said, looking for a teenage loophole. "Brenna, stop." "No, this is ridiculous, Mom," Brenna said. "You can't do this to me. It's been weeks now. I haven't seen my friends. I haven't had a life." Debbie sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Brenna, I'm sorry, but this is for your own good." Brenna stomped her foot, folded her arms, and let out a huff. She did an about-face and stomped her way up the stairs. Debbie rubbed her temples. Teenagers and lockdowns don't go together, she knew, but Debbie didn't know any other way to keep her daughter safe. At Brenna's school, she had an extra police officer posted. Brenna didn't know about this, but that's why she let her go to school in the first place. Debbie poured a glass of water from the Brita pitcher and looked out the front room window towards the street that not long ago had an ambulance blaring down it. She didn't want to do this to her daughter, but it would only be until the killer was caught. Soon, she told herself, soon. In reality, the Grove City police were no closer to nabbing the TikTok killer than they were when they first started. They kept a tight watch on all the drug zones in the city, but nothing turned up. Searches into the online profile of the person came up empty too, and there were no other Zest overdoses since the killing on the block. No more TikTok videos either. Captain Taylor needed a break, and fast, not just for her daughter to regain normalcy, but because of political pressure. Deputy Chief Higgs did his best to keep the peace, reaching out through back channels to the mayor's office and his media contacts, but that still didn't stop the chatter. Supermarket tabloids with headlines about who's next, hot air on talk radio saying it's all too much for a person like Chief Taylor, whatever that was supposed to mean. Debbie thought back to the first press conference when the killer responded to her question on TikTok. She thought they needed to fish him out again to get him to somehow react. She thought about doing another press conference, but didn't want another dead body as an outcome. There had to be another way, some other way to open a channel of communication. Without letting anyone else know, Debbie decided to start a personal TikTok account and send Zestfully Clean a direct message. She had to try to do something, and figured this more private way of communication may be, well, less messy. "You're there when it happens, aren't you?" Debbie typed on her phone. "The back door was open last time. You're getting sloppy." She figured that was enough to get his attention, a detail that was never disclosed. The killer would know who it was. She hit send, poured a glass of Pinot Noir, and sat on the couch, staring at her phone, waiting for a reply. Half a bottle later, her phone vibrated. Debbie put down her wine and read the message. "The screen door at 1055 Pine was open when I got there," it read. Debbie didn't understand at first. 1055 Pine? That wasn't her street. Then it hit her. This is their big break. He screwed up. He didn't know she was talking about the murder on her street. He's confessing to another one, maybe one in progress. After all, he hasn't put out a new TikTok message yet. She typed 1055 Pine into Google Maps. It was a house on the north side of town. Debbie immediately dialed Deputy Chief Higgs at the station and ordered the cavalry to roll. "We got this son of a bitch," she told Higgs as she pumped her fist into the air. Ivan Higgs urged caution. He said he wanted to get this guy too, and he knows how much it's affecting Debbie's family, but they need it more to go on. This isn't about my family, Chief Taylor snapped back. This is the best shot we have had. Let's show our strength, show that Grove City will not cower. We need to roll, get everyone suited up and go. Now. That's an order. Upstairs, Brenna was putting on her slimmest fitting blue jeans and halter top, the type of outfit her mother disapproved of. Puberty hit Brenna a couple of years earlier, and while she wasn't totally boy crazy like some of her friends, she had noticed her body more and how good it feels when she dresses in what she considered a sexy way. All of her friends were off to a party at Peyton's house tonight. His parents were away and his older brother was hooking them up with beer and more. Brenna didn't want to drink, but she didn't want to miss out on having fun. The whole school would be there, Peyton said. It was the party of a century, and Brenna wouldn't hear the end of it if she missed it. The plan was to stuff her covers with extra pillows, turn off the light, make it look like she's asleep. Then she would sneak out the window, hang from the ledge and drop onto the roof of the covered patio, and then hop onto the ground from there. She would meet her friends a block away and they'd walk the mile to Peyton's place. She figured with everything going on, her mom wouldn't do more than a cursory look inside her bedroom. The sirens wailed down the working-class neighborhood of Pine Street. The whirling lights lit up the darkness of the night and bounced off brick-front row houses. There were 5 black and whites and 2 unmarked cars with dashboard lights. Behind them was an armored van filled with SWAT team members. As the police filed out of their vehicles and took up position, an ABC News Channel 5 camera was waiting for them. Someone had tipped the media. Deputy Chief Higgs broadcasted on FaceTime so Chief Taylor could watch. It was a special request because the chief knew she couldn't make it to Pine before they arrived. The SWAT team went first. They stormed from the van 2 by 2. As they approached the front door, they fanned out. The screen was open, just like the TikTok killer said. It flapped in the breeze. Without a word, a SWAT member went to the door and knocked it open with one hit from the enforcer. Another followed that up with the toss of a flashbang grenade. After the detonation, the team stormed the house. A minute later, the all clear came over the radio. Deputy Chief Higgs entered. The lower level of the house was empty, but upstairs there was an old man, the old man who lived in the house. The sound of the flashbang made him piss his pants. The SWAT team found him hiding in the bathtub, shivering in fear. In Channel 5, it captured the whole thing. Peyton's party had it all. A DJ, a keg, and, just like Peyton said, the entire school. Except it wasn't just middle school, but high school kids as well. Folks Peyton's brother invited. Brenna was nervous when they walked to the party. She didn't want to disobey her mother like this. She never disobeyed. But this time, she thought it was justified. She thought her mother had gone a bit nuts about the dangers that lurked in the shadows. So what if people were ODing? She didn't use drugs. She didn't even drink. Brenna and friends danced in a tight circle as the bass line to Drake's Back-to-Back bounced through the DJ speakers. On the other side of the room, they saw Ray talking to Keenan. Brenna's bestie Jordan liked Ray, so they decided to turn it up a notch. The girls turned around, shook their moneymaker, and pretended to slap each other's butts. Ray stopped talking to Keenan and stared. The girls laughed. Mayor Guilford called Chief Taylor as soon as the spot ran on ABC Channel 5 about the botched raid. The man on the TV barely got out the words, "There was no one in the house but a scared old man," before the chief's phone vibrated with the mayor's call. Debbie sighed before answering. "God damn it! Who do you think you are breaking into old man's houses? What the fuck are you doing such a thing? You know what the papers are going to say tomorrow? You know what the voters are going to say?" Debbie didn't say a word as the mayor barked for nearly 5 minutes about what a fuck-up she was, what a disappointment, and how maybe he was wrong to appoint her to the position. When Debbie did try to get a word in, the mayor continued talking about the lawsuit the city would now face and what a goddamn mess it all was, and how she was going to have to clean up her own shit. "I won't cover for you anymore," the mayor screamed before he hung up the phone. Brenna left her dancing friends to pee. She walked past drunk teens, teens making out, teens smoking weed, and teens passed out in corners. When she got to the upstairs bathroom, she closed the door, locked it, and relieved herself. She spent an extra few minutes in front of the mirror, not because she needed to fix herself up, but because she was enjoying the break from the blaring DJ. She was enjoying a moment of solitude. On the way downstairs, a man tugged her arm. "Jenny?" "No, I'm sorry," Brenna said, pulling her arm free. The man looked at her and smiled. She didn't know the person. The man had a moppy cut of brown hair. It looked like he hadn't washed it in a while, or at least hadn't combed it. His face was clean-shaven, but he had a weathered look. Though he wasn't old enough to be somebody's parent, he was older than everyone else. Certainly not a junior high or high school student. And he was white. Most of the students at the party were black. "Doesn't matter," the man said as he pulled Brenna tight, hugging her from behind, holding her as she fought and kicked to no avail. The bumping bass muted her pleas for help. The kids around her were too drunk or stoned to notice she was in trouble. The man took out a handkerchief from his back pocket and smothered Brenna's face. She was out. Chief Taylor's phone vibrated as she put the finishing touches on the bottle of wine. "Jesus, not again," Debbie said, thinking she was going to get another earful from the mayor. She picked up the phone and looked at her lock screen. It was a notification from TikTok. Zestfully Clean posted a new video. Debbie unlocked her phone and opened the TikTok app. The video started with blackness. Then, the familiar red typewriter font came on the screen. "I could be in any house, a Pyrex pot, a beaker, and a strainer. That's all I need." The video showed a brown substance bubbling on a spoon. "Special delivery. Into her veins," the words read. The camera panned to a slumped-over young black girl. Her chin was down against her chest, obscuring her face. A needle hung out of her arm just under the crook of her elbow. Even on the TikTok video, Debbie could see the green skin bubbling around the injection site. Debbie didn't make the connection, however, and why would she? Her daughter was upstairs sleeping peacefully. It wasn't until a white hand grabbed the girl's braids and raised her head to show a zonked-out, sky-high Brenna that Debbie dropped her wine glass. She dropped her phone too and crumbled to the ground. She didn't even read the words that came next on the screen. "What's that you feel?" Debbie couldn't breathe, literally couldn't get in one breath. She clutched at her cramping stomach and felt like she would throw up. Brenna was her everything. Debbie was her protector. And now, the lights from her ceiling flickered. The world was going dark, slowly at first, then fast. Then it ceased to exist at all. The phone vibrating on the tile floor brought Debbie back to reality. She didn't know how long she had been out, but her stomach was still cramping. Her chest felt tight on pins and needles. She looked down at her phone. It was Deputy Chief Higgs. "I take it you saw the latest," Higgs said. Debbie didn't reply, but the sound of sobbing told Higgs all he needed to know. "Don't do anything," he said. "I'm coming over right now." When Debbie hung up, her phone vibrated again. She received a direct message from somebody on TikTok. "Test time," the message read. "It's multiple choice. A red, B purple, C dead, D all of the above. Your choice." There's also a write-in answer, 1140 Pine. No one else but you, or the answer most certainly will be D, all of the above. Debbie wiped away the tears from her face. She watched the TikTok video with her strung-out daughter again. She didn't know how he got Brenna, but judging by the way she was dressed, it was clear Brenna snuck out of the house. In normal circumstances, Debbie would be furious with Brenna. Now her fury was directed at the one holding her daughter hostage. She knew she should call this in. She knew she should wait for Higgs, but to hell with the protocol, to hell with the mayor. This was her family. The door to 1140 Pine was open when Debbie pulled up. The house looked the same as the brick row houses she saw in the FaceTime video from the botched raid. Debbie unholstered her pistol and scanned the perimeter. The unsettling calm of midnight pervaded the neighborhood. Fluorescent street lights cast a greenish glow on the street and blotted out the stars in the sky. Debbie entered the house in slow motion, her finger on the trigger. She wanted to whisper for her daughter, but knew it would be no use, not in her drugged-up state. She also didn't want to give her location away, just in case she could take the killer by surprise, though she thought this wasn't likely. After a few steps into the dark house, Debbie banged her shin on the coffee table. She nearly let out a yelp, but contained it by biting her lower lip. She kept moving forward, her gun out, her hand shakier than she expected or wanted. Through the front room, she saw stairs on her right, the kitchen to her left. Light from the clock on the microwave and oven bounced off white countertops and gave an eerie pale blue glow. There was no one in the kitchen either. Debbie took a deep breath and kept walking to the back of the house. It remained silent and dark. There was nobody home. She wondered if she was being set up again, if the killer was toying with her again, sending her to an empty house or maybe to another one with a scared old man. There was one way to find out. Debbie began climbing the stairs. The worn wooden stairs creaked as Debbie moved up them. Even when she slowed her pace to baby steps, the wood moaned. When she got to the landing, she paused to get her bearings. Glow from the streetlights outside illuminated a white hallway with 3 doors. Given the size of the house, Debbie assumed it was 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. No matter how much cop training Debbie had, or how many sticky situations she had been in over the years, nothing really prepared her for these types of life or death situations. Nothing could stop her pulse from making her neck thump, from making her guts go squishy, or making her heart rattle in her chest. Nothing could calm her mind as it thought through infinite scenarios, most of which ended with death. Yet Debbie tried. She took in a couple of more deep breaths, trying to center herself by thinking of Brenna. Then she walked down the hall. Debbie opened the door to the first room. It was an empty bedroom. Though she didn't think Brenna would be in there, she checked the closet anyways. Then she went to the door across the hall. It was an empty bathroom. She checked behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Debbie checked her pockets on her cargo pants. Not that anything fell out, but she always had the habit of touching things in her pockets, mentally going through checklists of items she may need and what may happen with them. In one pocket, she had her zip ties. Those were in case she could capture the bastard that took her daughter. In the other pocket, she had Narcan. This she would use on Brenna when she found her. In her front pocket, she didn't have her phone. Damn it, she thought. She left it in the car. Debbie wanted to send a message to Ivan. She shouldn't have rushed in like this. Somebody needed to know where she was at. Someone needed to help if things went south. Debbie thought about turning around and getting the phone out of her car, but with only one room left to inspect and a daughter doped up and half dead, she didn't have time. Goosebumps covered Debbie's flesh. She mouthed a silent prayer and turned the doorknob, pushing the door open with her foot while holding the gun at arm's length. Brenna! Debbie jerked forward to run when a voice came from the shadows. A man said. Brenna was slumped with her back against the wall, just as she was in the TikTok video. 2 small lights flooded her figure, making her the center of attention in a dark room. A phone on a tripod was aimed at her body. The man sat next to her, half in the shadows, his hand on the plunger of a needle hanging out of Brenna's arm. Brenna's chin was still in her chest. It swayed lazily right to left, moving like a pendulum. The skin on her forearm bubbled green. Yellow pus and milky discharge dripped as the bubbles popped. Whatever the killer injected was rotting her whole arm. "Gun down," the man said. "Gun down or Jamar's love child gets a fatal dose." Debbie's eyes went wide. How did he know about Jamar? She held her hands up in a surrender fashion, pinching the barrel of the pistol with an index finger and thumb. Then she bent down, put the pistol on the ground, and kicked it away. "That's right," the man said. "Now tell me, how does it feel to see a loved one like this, dying slowly from drugs, a needle hanging off her body? It hurts, doesn't it? You have hurt so many. You killed my mom, you and Jamar. It's time for me to take your world." "Jamar? What's he got to do with any of this?" The man laughed a sick, maniacal laugh. Debbie worried his thumb would slip and he would inject the fatal dose into Brenna. She stepped forward again. "Watch it," the man said. "Don't move. Not one more step, otherwise she'll be zestfully clean." He laughed again, this time more demented than the last. Just hands off the plunger," Debbie said. "Take your hand off and we can talk. Tell me, what does Jamar have to do with this, Mr.?" The man removed his hand from the needle and began stroking Brenna's arm gently. Debbie cringed. "Call me Bo." "I know you're Jamar's baby mama," the man said. "You're the reason my mother killed herself. You stole Jamar from her, and she loved Jamar more than life herself." Brenna's back started sliding down the wall. She landed on her shoulder and her head bounced off the carpet. Drool began running out of her mouth. Debbie knew she didn't have much time. So now what?" Debbie said, feeling herself get angry. "So now you go kill Jamar's kid? You kill my daughter?" "Her first, then you," Bo said, laughing again. He reached over to grab Brenna, struggling to pull her upright. Debbie knew this was her only shot. She charged at Bo, who let go of Brenna to defend himself. Debbie's boot connected with Bo's jaw. The back of his head knocked against the wall, stunning him. Debbie grabbed the Narcan from her pocket and stuck the nozzle in Brenna's nose. She pushed down the plunger, saying another prayer. "Dear Jesus, please work." When Debbie swung around to zip-tie the man, he was gone from the spot she left him. She didn't think he left the room, but she couldn't see in the darkness. The 2 spotlights were on her now, as was the phone's camera. She was the show. "Bo, end of the line!" Debbie yelled into the darkness. Her voice projected police authority, but her eyes flashed fear and concern. "You're done! Don't make me hurt you! Give up!" From behind, something hard and metallic whacked her back and made her drop to her knees. Bo jumped her and they wrestled, knocking over the lights and the phone on the tripod. Their elongated shadows boxed on the walls and ceiling. Bo picked up the tripod pole and swung it around overhead, whipping it like somebody does a towel. Debbie danced out of the way, but she was running out of real estate. He kept swinging. She put up her arms to defend herself, but the metal was in motion and it was too much. It clunked the side of her head and sent her to the carpet. Straddling Debbie, Bo pushed the tripod onto her neck, cutting off all oxygen. Debbie kicked frantically and flopped like a fish, but with the man sitting on her chest, it was no use. She thought of Brenna as the world started to fade once more. When she woke up, the lights were on her again, blinding her. She was positioned against the wall in a seated position. The zip ties she brought with her were now bound around her own hands and feet. In her arm was a needle. Bo was standing next to the camera. "I'm so glad TikTok allows longer videos now because I want the whole world to see this from start to finish. I want them to watch as your pupils dilate and roll in the back of your head, how ecstasy will mix with pain as you feel your flesh disintegrate, how your heart will slow, your throat will dry, and it will feel like your insides are on fire. I want the whole world to watch me kill you." Bo hit the record button on the camera's phone and took a seat next to Debbie. He wrapped her arm with a tourniquet and waited for her veins to pop. When they showed, he licked his lips, laughed his psychotic laugh, and said, "Juicy." Then he pulled out a syringe loaded with brown goo and stabbed it into her arm, pressing slowly, laughing the whole time. The hit was immediate. Debbie was floating in the clouds. She felt her body separating from reality, but it was fleeting. She was brought back to earth by searing pain, the feeling of her arm melting slowly, as if with each beat of her heart, her arm sizzled on a frying pan. Her head slumped down to her chest as the narcotic went deep into her system, shutting down everything but pain, everlasting pain, never-ending pain that radiated to the tips of her fingers and toes. Her breathing slowed until she started snoring. In between breaths was Bo's laughter. Bo didn't even hear the footsteps approaching over the sound of his hysteria. There was a flash and a bang, and he went down. Deputy Chief Higgs ran to Debbie, checking her vitals and administering Narcan. As he waited for her to come around, he turned to Bo. Blood sprayed the back of the wall and pooled on the beige carpet. Higgs got him in the trapezius and neck area. Bo rolled on the ground and screamed, holding his neck. The blood went through his fingers like a sieve. Though Bo screamed and hollered, Higgs knew he would live. He zip-tied his feet so he couldn't run and called an ambulance. Debbie and Brenna rode to the hospital in the ambulance together. It was Brenna who was able to crawl out of the house on Pine Street and alert the neighbors. They're the ones who called the cops. The next morning after Debbie was discharged, she got a call from the mayor. He relieved her of duty. Deputy Chief Higgs vouched for her and tried to plead with the mayor for her to keep her job, but it was no use. But Debbie wasn't mad. She thought it was just fine. After what happened, she thought both her and Brenna could use some time away. Rehab, if you will. Not that they were addicts after one hit, but it was time to rehab the heart. To reflect about life and pain and all the decisions made, good or bad.